We're now streaming live on YouTube for the world to watch.
Hello. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and go. I'm gonna go to my Facebook and share right now.
Cool.
For those of you that are just joining us, we are still letting few people log on, and we'll get started with our meeting in just a few moments. Thank you so much for joining us.
Erica almost made me feel like we were about to go on a flight.
Right? I can totally do. Please put on your mask before you put on your person next to you. Yeah, I totally. Please check for the rear exit. I will say it's been a long time since I've been on a flight, and I kind of missed that part.
I just missed traveling outside of the city of Fresno.
I got to be honest with you, Jamie. I kind of miss Mexico. I'll say even. I miss the Mexican beaches and just. Yeah.
Doesn't that sound lovely?
The food.
That's a good idea, because I'm trying to figure out what kind of vacation. My therapist keeps telling me, "Doug, you need to get out of your comfort zone," and just trying to get out in the world. But I'm like, I'm trying to figure out where I want to go. So.
I haven't seen people going very much farther than Mexico internationally, but I have seen a lot of people go to Hawaii, and Mexico seem to be pretty popular right now.
Really? Okay, yeah. I guess they want to be close to the state, I guess.
Yeah. Or, the beaches, of course, if you can drive, right? If you can find, Pismo or San Luis Obispo or Monterey or San Diego, those are popular.
Yes. Oh my God! I need to change. I think the scene of surrounding, be cool.
Doug, what do you like to do? Do you like to be with other people? Do you like to be at a beach? Do you like to go out to like restaurants or bars?
Actually, I'm pretty flexible. As I'm getting a little older as I am right now, I'm kind of eliminating bars right now. But as far as going to beaches, going to the park, get a picnic, go to the train scenery. I always want to go to a train scenery. You know what I mean? So it's really nice.
Because I once took the train from Sacramento to Seattle, which was awesome. I got a little sleeper car, so that was really fun. And then when I got to Seattle, I just hung out for a couple days and then came back. But then if you like to party, I went to Key West once. And I think you could have fun in Key West, West Florida. Key West.
Oh, wow.
Key West parties.
I need to go with somebody. Some of the people that I'm around with are still old. They don't want to get out. I'm like, hey, I want to go.
I'm still on COVID lockdown. So next year, 2022.
Yes, I know.
Absolutely. Well, welcome all of you that have joined us. We've got a pretty good group on the line right now. So thank you so much. It is great to see you. If you joined us in the middle of the last conversation, we all have a little bit of wanderlust. We're all ready to take some kind of virtual or otherwise vacation. Certainly. Everyone, I think, is looking forward to the chance when we can see each other in person and go travel again. So we are going to go ahead and begin our meeting for the Stockton Steering Committee for the AB 617 community. We're so excited to see you all. Happy March, if you can believe it. We have been quarantined for almost a year. It is absolutely insane to think about that, but I just want to allow for that acknowledgement that we have done so much in the last year. I'm sure individually and as your organizations that you represent have made adjustments and pivots, and it's just absolutely incredible to think about the fact that it is March 2021, and about this time last year we were debating when we would meet again in person and whether it was safe, and then we transitioned to virtual for almost 365 days now. So absolute kudos to all of you, and hopefully you're all doing well with your families and with your work situation. And we are certainly grateful that you're here with us tonight. So we are here with the team from the Institute for Local Government. My name is Erica. I'm the CEO, and I'm here with a team of fantastic people named Hannah and Kim, who do help behind the scenes with facilitation with these meetings, and they're here to help you with any problems that you're going to have, if you have any. But since we've been doing this for about, 9 months at least on Zoom, I feel like we've done quite a bit of this. But if you have any issues, we are happy to help make sure that your process runs smoothly. Our goal is to make sure that the community voices are heard and incorporated, and that you successfully move forward with your Serp and with reducing emissions in Stockton, which is ultimately the goal. And so we try to keep your meetings going, keep your meetings moving, and get you out on time so that you can move on with your day. So as I mentioned, we have had a lot of Zoom meetings, and so we're going to dispense with the majority of the logistics, but on your screen, you can see how the screen naming is noted. And then also on the screen are just a reminder of the controls for Zoom in case some of you are joining us for the first time or you forgot, because sometimes you do forget. Blue Zoom hands to raise your hand, stay on mute if you can to keep background noise to a minimum. Use the chat box to communicate questions, but keep those chats to the focused item that we're discussing at the time. And then if you need to link your account, feel free to do that by using your participant ID. The other thing is that we started stipends this year, as you know, and if you are in that stipend program, please do stay on this meeting for 75% of the meeting to get credit for the stipends. And as always, this meeting is being recorded and there will be public comments, but they will be at the end. And also note that there may be votes taken at this meeting. So while we're going through the process of naming and screen naming, please note that your screen name might change and you didn't do it, and that is just the ILG team. We like to make sure that we can flag everyone who is eligible to vote, so we may go in and change your name for you. As always, these CSC meetings are open to the public, and we're grateful to those people from the public that are participating on YouTube today. And those are also potentially streamed on Facebook, so thank you for joining us. And again, there will be a public comment portion at the end of this meeting, and you can also submit comments on email at ab617@valleyair.org, and those will be addressed during the public comment period. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our host from the Air District, Ryan, to give his welcome before we talk about the agenda and the background for today.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you, Erica, and everybody tonight. I'm really excited, appreciative. I can't thank everybody enough. If I thanked each of you 1,000 times over, it wouldn't be enough. The commitment, the time commitment that this committee has put towards not only the meetings themselves, but I know there's just been a tremendous volume of information that's been shared with the committee that I know they've taken the time outside of these meetings to familiarize themselves with and really study and delve into. And it's just been tremendous. And this has been a fantastic community steering committee. We really enjoyed working with all of you, and we've enjoyed getting your feedback and your honest criticisms and comments about what needed to be included. And in going back through this exercise for preparing tonight, Jessica's going to do a presentation on it. It's remarkable the number of strategies that were developed by this committee. Exposure reduction strategies, emission reduction strategies. And it's just exciting knowing that we're going to transition, hopefully, from the development to the implementation phase. We're going to do this work, and we're going to get the emission reductions, and we're going to protect people's health through exposure reductions. And I had a great conversation with Gil Rosas from Stockton Unified, and he may be one of the most excited people to get this going of anybody. Once again, just re-energize me for the opportunities that this program presents for the members of the Valley, and that we have a responsibility to look after their public health. And so just super excited, and just like I said, it's been an honor to work with all of you. And I know when I say that, I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm definitely speaking for our air pollution control officer, who has been so supportive of everything that has gone on here. Our board members who've been really supportive of these efforts, and obviously the Air District staff who have dedicated tremendous amount of time, both during regular work hours, nights, weekends, meeting with you, all of you, talking with you, getting to know the stories, the reasons why you're passionate about this work. And also definitely want to thank the various agencies that we've talked to. Obviously Jeff in the Port of Stockton, Sandy with the Housing Authority. I mentioned Gil, Albert with the city, Robin with the county. There are just so many, and we're really looking forward to moving forward. And yeah, just can't express my excitement even tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. I think we saw a lot of really positive reactions, a lot of head nods. It's an important time in the process for this CSE. And I wanted to acknowledge the 1-year anniversary of sort of the month that we all began our 2-week shelter in place, because you've done a lot despite so many obstacles and so many challenges. And you've kind of weathered through and have kind of modeled what community kind of connection and coordination is, and in a virtual environment, which we were all working to figure out. So thank you for that process, and thank you for all the work you have done and the work you will continue to do, because I think that there is lots of work to be done on implementation and certainly discussions to be had today. So as Ryan mentioned, tonight's meeting is incredibly important. It's incredibly exciting. You have reached a key milestone in this development process. And so I want to show you on the screens kind of where you are in that process, just to center us all in the transparency of the process. You've seen this slide before many times, and we wanted to make sure that you were really clear on how you got here and where you were going throughout the process. And we have gone from the very third box just a couple weeks ago to the bottom of this flow chart right now. And that is huge. It's just a massive amount of work, hundreds of hours of work, a ton of commitment from each of you to get to where you are. And just a personal note, I will say that, ILG has been facilitating these conversations with your community since the CSC was formed last year, but I didn't actively join this team until about September or October. And so some of you may not know this, but I am from the Central Valley. I grew up in Stanislaus County. My family still lives up and down the valley. My niece lives in Stockton. She has asthma, and the work that you're doing is helping to make sure that she can breathe better. And I just am grateful for all of your support on this effort. And I am a neutral facilitator. My job is to make sure your meetings start on time and end on time, and that you engage in the process. But we are all in this together. And I think it's important to note that there's so much connection between all of us, and the work you're doing is so, so, so important, especially for Black and Brown people like me. And even though I am in a different role, I want to express my gratitude for all the work that you're doing and that you have done. So because this is a really important meeting, we wanted to give you all a chance just to give the time and space to cover a few important things. So this is where we are on the development process. And if it moves forward, the board with the Air District will vote in a couple of weeks. Today, our meeting needs to cover these things to get that done. We talked about sort of making sure that we have a background and a conversation around what has happened. Then we need to talk about inclusion of some remaining Serp measures. We are going to vote on what is the final Serp or a version thereof. And then we need to make sure that we have public comments. As a reminder, today's meeting is slated to end at 7:30 to give us enough time to cover all of these topics. And at the last meeting, it was really a long conversation. It was a robust conversation. It was really important topics were discussed, but this is how we got to the agenda today. It was based on a lot of dialogue around the process and around what your values were and what you wanted to see in your Serp and how you wanted to get there. And so if you're wondering, if you missed the last meeting and you're wondering what's left, there's a reason for this. And I want to honor and acknowledge the voices that did request some additional discussion around some of those measures. I also wanted to flag a couple things that went into the meeting at the last time, because I see that we do have a lot of people on the line today. Some of you I know did not participate in that conversation. Let's do a really brief recap for those of you that were not on the line. The first part of the conversation that we talked about was just how we engage in the dialogue. We're going to talk for 2.5 hours. How do we do that with 70 people on the line? The first reminder, I think, is just to step up and step back. We have discussed that before. It's a protocol that we are pretty familiar with in facilitation. If you notice that you're speaking up a little bit more than your fellow CSC members, just take a step back and allow others' opinions to be represented. If you notice that you are offering maybe a little less comment than you could, step up, speak up. And we just want to make sure your values and your opinions are heard as well. And residents, certainly I want to see you voicing your thoughts as much as possible, because this is about where you live and what you are going to experience. And so we really, really appreciate everyone's feedback and certainly that balance of discussion. The next slide really speaks about a couple of tips for sharing this virtual space. At the last meeting, if you missed it, we made some adjustments to how we're going to engage, because we did receive a lot of feedback about the chat, specifically around difficulty following the chat and the verbal discussion at the same time when the chat's really busy. And so we wanted to ask that we maintain a very limited chat discussion and focus that on the item that's being discussed right then, so that we can make sure that the dialogue gets really, the focus is on the dialogue and less on the chat discussion. We also want to make sure, as I mentioned, that we hear from residents. This is so much about your Serp and your community, and we want to make sure that the impacts are heard and that the decisions that are made are voiced across the group. And so people living in the boundary, representing the community, this is a chance for you to participate. It's a chance for all of us to hear from you and learn from you, grow together, and share together. The last but not least request is, if you can, please keep your cameras on. I know it's late. I know that you may be in your pajamas already. I know that you may be multitasking. That is okay. But if you can, we ask you to keep your camera on, just so that I can read your body language, so that I can see your expressions, and that I can get a sense of the feeling of your nonverbal cues while we're going through the dialogue, so that I don't miss something or misinterpret something. Obviously, if we were in a meeting in person, this wouldn't be an issue. But with Corona, you know, it's complicated our interactions a little, and this is a really important meeting, and we want to make sure we get everything right. So I do thank you in advance for your grace and as much participation as you can offer. In addition to these meeting protocols, we did talk about a couple more of the complex emission reduction measures and the budget at the last meeting. We talked about how adding or removing certain measures from your SERP could impact the bottom line of the budget. And we talked about what the impacts might be on the emission reductions that might happen if you do include or do not include certain measures in your SERP. And this group had a really deliberate, a really thoughtful, a really strategic conversation about what you wanted to do there. You had a lot of questions. And that's why after that, we really decided to revisit a few of the red measures in that sorting exercise that didn't get added in the last time. So for the last 2 weeks or so, you all should have received a number of pieces of information via email about measures. A lot of things like health studies. You should have received details about port information, school bus information. There's a lot of things have come your way. And that's in advance of having conversation today about those measures. We're going to, at your request, revisit some of those discussions so you can really think and talk together about that. And you have the option to include those in the SERP if you choose to. So that's where we are. And that's the recap for those of you that might have missed all or part of the last couple of meetings. So with the appendices, your draft SERP is almost 200 pages. It is a massive document, and that is a huge kudos to everybody that pulled it together, everybody that provided feedback. It's an undertaking that is absolutely monumental. So I just applaud you all. It's incredible. There's a lot of information in it. And as we were thinking about how do we structure a 2.5-hour meeting where we talk about the SERP and we talk about measures, we really wanted to make sure that you had what you needed to think about it and to give really thoughtful conversation about it. So one of the things that I want to do is just flag for you a couple things on the goals, and then I'm going to ask Jess with the Air District to kind of come in and give you guys another high-level review of it, because 200 pages is a lot to talk about in this forum, and we really want to think about it in an appropriate way. So I'll have you just show on the slide really quickly just to center us around the intent, especially for those of you that might be watching on YouTube. The goals of the document of the SERP are to, first and foremost, reduce emissions. Second, to meet community air pollution reduction priorities. And then third, really support the community at large. It's really important that the SERP meets those objectives. And, you know, with a committee of 70, everyone's not going to love every piece of it, but it should address some of the key goals and the key values that you all have. And so many of you have expressed those so eloquently over the last few months. For the last 45 days, people have been editing this document and sharing their feedback and giving that to the Air District, which is fantastic. And then Jess is going to talk a little bit about kind of that feedback and those priorities and how you were not only heard, but also understood. And I think it's an important distinction to make. And I think Jess is going to talk a little bit about that. I know it's one of those things where you hear people always like, oh, I heard you, I hear you. Yeah, but how did you hear me? And what did you do with that information? And so I think Jess is going to be able to give you guys a little bit more insight about what that means to the Air District right now and how they've been taking your feedback and really incorporating it so it's not lip service. It's actual feet on the ground, boots on the ground in the SERP ready for implementation. So with that, I will turn it over to Jess to talk about where you are and how you got here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Erica. And I mean, without going into it too much, I could not help but I was like sending all the emojis I could through Zoom to support a lot of what Ryan and Erica just said. This is such a big undertaking. And we received so many just thoughtful comments, whether they were calls and just discussions with us, whether they were comments and chats through all these different meetings, especially the recent months. And then of course, some really thoughtful, really well put together comment letters that I think just steered this SERP to, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think the best SERP that's out there right now. I think there's so many unique, interesting, cool measures that we're just so excited to move forward and really start to put the details to and really get to that implementation phase. So I just want to acknowledge again, all of the hard work. I drank a lot of coffee before this, so I am sorry if I speak too fast. But I'm just so excited to kind of push this through the finish line if that's truly, you know, the support that we've gained tonight. So just starting with what Erica just mentioned, you know, of course, we see the dedication, the commitment, and really worked together to develop this community emission reduction program. And as you'll see through this quick little sort of summary that we're going to present right now, it really addresses and looks to address all of those concerns identified by the community. And those three buckets that Erica just showed, I really think, you know, one of the important ones that we certainly heard through all of the letters and all of the comments is, you know, we know it's a community emission reduction program and we see all of the tons, and I'll summarize those for you in a moment here, all of the emissions reductions we're going to get. But there were so many comments and so many adamant supporters saying we need to also reduce exposure, we need outreach strategies, we need to mitigate the impacts of the air pollution that's already there. And so really I would, you know, we're going to summarize here for you soon, showing that the SERP is really driven by those community identified exposure reduction and outreach strategies. We have air filtration, vegetative barriers, bike paths, heavy duty truck rerouting study, and then several outreach strategies to educate residents, not only on how to protect themselves, but how to take advantage of all of the resident-based incentive measures that you've included in your SERP, as well as how to just prevent pollution from actions that they can take on their own. And then of course, a community emission reduction program would not be complete without emissions reductions. And a lot of the strategies that you guys have included in the SERP were really supported by a lot of that technical information a lot of you asked for, a lot of the technical information that has been shared this whole year. In addition to a lot of recent information, you all have taken it upon yourselves, as Ryan so eloquently put, to take a lot of extra time of yours to really dig through and understand and support a lot of the targets that we've put here in the SERP. So, you know, of course, reducing impact from the highest pollution sources, and we've discussed it time and time again, that's really those heavy duty mobile sources, whether it's trucks or trains or even port emissions. But also emission reductions incentives to residents. We acknowledged as a committee, we don't want all of these incentives to just go to businesses. We want them to go towards residents, to get them into cleaner vehicles, car share programs, new lawn and garden equipment, residential wood burning fireplaces, and those are all in those SERPs. So these were all driven by you all, and I just wanted to acknowledge that we think it strikes a really nice balance between exposure reductions and the emissions reduction component sort of necessary to get a SERP approved. So how did we get here? What was the process? It's been a year. It's been a year in many ways. And I think we all acknowledge that 2020 was quite the year. And really it was sort of 6 steps that led us, or really 5 steps, with the 6th being the draft that we ended up with last month. And we're going to just kind of walk you through these. Just as a reminder, I think there are a lot of people on this call that haven't been at every meeting. And I think just a refresher of how we built this from the ground up. We started with a lot of technical information and historical context information. So we kind of came from both angles. A lot of people who were technically based wanted to understand on a technical level where the emissions coming from. We went through really sort of detailed maps and analyses, as I just showed here, but we also understood from a historical context a lot of really the restrictive redlining and racist history of how the Stockton community became this environmental justice community, and really what led it to ultimately being selected for this great opportunity to take advantage of this program. So that really built our foundation to understand where we are so we know what we can do next. And really after that, a lot of you might recall, we worked on a lot of different maps and mapped a lot of different things. This was so long ago, it feels like. This was in May. In May, we went through an exercise where we looked at a map and people had an opportunity to place on that map what their sources of concern were. And then if you recall, it was our first foray into breakout groups. We actually did breakout groups where we talked about different sources. This is notes from June with steering committee member ideas about how to take those sources of concern and then tackle them. People suggested that there could be allocated funding to replace locomotives. And certainly that's something that's been added to the Serp. There were several pages of notes about heavy duty truck traffic. And all of these measures, as you can see here, and I'm sure you're familiar with, were led to Serp strategies, replacing locally based trucks with clean technologies, using vegetative barriers, but making sure they're drought tolerant, which is something we can do through implementation, better enforcement of truck and bus idling rules, air monitoring in the bogs tract area. All of these things were committee generated ideas that made it into your Serp and your camp. And then of course, urban greening and a variety of other different components that certainly made it into the Serp. So I just kind of wanted to highlight, of course, that a lot of these ideas, while every idea didn't make it in based on the discussion through the committee, all of the ideas were at least discussed and considered. So through that exercise, it was really apparent that there were sort of like 6 main sources of concern that the committee wanted to tackle. And you'll see throughout the Serp, and a lot of you hopefully have had time to look through the various drafts of the Serp, but even if you haven't, if you've been a part of these conversations and talked about these strategies with Erica, helping us move them in and out of the Serp, you know that they tackle all of these. You know we have measures that hit at either reducing emissions from or mitigating impacts from all of these different sources. So really that led us to starting with our draft strategies. I'm sure a lot of you remember this. I do not remember this. I was on maternity leave, but I was just so excited when we got back and all of this feedback for these draft strategies. There were so many interesting, unique suggestions and additional discussion about these strategies that really crafted them to become what they are in the Serp right now. And from there, we did what we've been doing the past couple of months. These slides will look probably exhaustingly familiar to you. We had orders and reorders, sort of original buckets and revised buckets, if you will, where the community really took time to prioritize the strategies and come up with which strategies we wanted to include in the Serp, which strategies we were saying, we'll still talk about it. And that's kind of what Erica was alluding to. And then there were certainly strategies that we decided not to include in the Serp and they aren't in there, but that was all based on the CSC feedback, and just acknowledging all of that work and thought that went into that is certainly something we wanted to do today. And then of course, what all of that led to this draft Serp. We, as promised last meeting, came up not only with our original draft, but took a lot of feedback to include a lot of different sort of changes, whether they were just corrections to a couple of things that some eagle-eye CSC members noticed, or additions of a lot of detailed information to support the strategies in the Serp. The latest draft with that sort of strikeout underline should really reflect, we think, a lot of the changes that the committee was asking for in this really, what we're thinking is sort of the final or close to final draft of the SERP we're going to vote on tonight. So with that, there were a couple of things I just want to really quickly highlight because there are so many measures in this SERP, and I don't want to lose sight of what I think one of the kind of important common comments we received, whether it was to support or maybe just question the SERP, is how are these different than what the Air District already does? Or how is this SERP really a unique, first of its kind SERP? And so what we've done here, these are all of the measures that are in your SERP. These are all of those measures that we moved in those buckets back and forth. And we're starting with those mitigation or exposure reduction strategies. These first list under exposure reductions and outreach and education strategies are all strategies that aren't just emission reduction strategies. And anything that has a green asterisk, whether it's vegetative barriers or air filtration in schools, all of these in that first section, you'll notice have an asterisk. That means it is not an existing district program. Either it's new because of 617, so it's only new this past year through implementation in our other SERP communities, or it's brand new just to Stockton. And in that case, the air filtration in homes measure and addressing the algal blooms is something that's completely unique. But regardless, these are all supported new exposure reduction measures that the district has never done before or is only just now starting to do with other 617 communities. And then of course we have a lot of that education and outreach. There was a lot of interest in making sure education and outreach came over some of the enforcement for residents, and that's something that we prioritized here and removed that sort of enhanced enforcement piece to support that education component. Another, we kind of had to go actually onto a second slide. We have all of these other enforcement strategies that are part of that mitigation. But all of these, as you notice, they are not enforcement for residents. These are enforcements and really keeping those businesses accountable, those permitted sources accountable, or those that are using heavy duty mobile sources accountable. So that's what these 5 enforcement strategies.
I'm sorry for interrupting. My interpreter keep kicking off 2 times already while you're talking so fast, and the video is kind of frozen a couple of times already. So just letting you know what's going on. Okay. I
will definitely talk slower. Mark, are we good? Maybe I'll stop sharing my screen really.
I don't see him.
You don't see Mark?
I don't know. He's on or not.
I'm going to stop for 1 moment.
We will check. Sure. Yeah, we will check and see how Mark's doing. He might have lost the feed. Let's go in. Mark is here, but let's see if he's frozen. He actually seems to be away from his chair.
Oh. Let's just give it a minute or 2.
Absolutely.
We'll take a slight break. Just a short. This is a great time for maybe a bio break if you needed one.
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I see his screen, but I don't see a person, and I want to validate that with Hannah and Kim. Can you confirm that you're seeing what I see with ASL?
Yes. Hopefully nothing had happened.
Well, okay, I get the video is on. Okay, we're stuck and frozen. Maybe you maybe have it on, and maybe it's fixing the background. But go ahead, go ahead and speak right now. Okay. So I got them pinned already.
All right, I'm actually only a couple of slides away, Douglas, and the meat of what I'm saying are on the slides.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you everyone for your patience. Let me just reshare my screen.
Oh, Mark is back.
Mark is back.
Are we good?
Not quite yet. Let's see.
Apparently they're doing some work on my building and they never told me. So it's going to impact my internet the entire time. I just went out there right now. I am so sorry. I will do my best to continue for you guys, but it may keep cutting out again. I just went out there right now and was like, hey, I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of a meeting. Do you guys mind? And they were like, oh, sorry, we're working on lines. So I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. Sorry.
Life happens, Mark. Thank you for letting us know. Keep us posted. We'll keep an eye on you too. We'll pin you and we will do our best. And Douglas, let's see if I can find you. If you can also let us know when something happens, if you are able to see Mark, and if not, we'll do our best to slow down or give you what you need.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Douglas.
Okay.
All right, thanks everybody. Hopefully some of you are back from your bio break, and Jess, you can keep going.
I promise I'm almost done, but please interrupt me at any point. I appreciate it, Douglas and Mark. Moving on though, as mentioned, it's really a good balance between these mitigation, we're reducing exposure, we're protecting the children in the schools, we're protecting the folks from air quality on the outside, we're adding vegetative barriers, we're enforcing all of the businesses in the area and making sure that they are complying with the regulations. We also, of course, have a duty as an emissions reduction program to reduce emissions. And so we have several emissions reduction strategies that directly reduce emissions. And then we have several that support the emissions reductions and mitigation strategies. So these are all of them. These all directly reduce emissions. As you can see, the top handful, just about half of them are all to support residents. These are getting residents into cleaner new vehicles, electric vehicles. This is to get a car share program so that residents can share electric vehicles, bike paths and infrastructure. It's replacing wood burning devices. It's getting new lawn and garden equipment to residents. It's getting new lawn and garden equipment to commercial operators who operate just within the boundary. Those are all those resident focused emissions reduction strategies. And then of course, as we're all very familiar with discussing, certainly with kind of just going back and forth and getting a lot of information, we also have these big, heavy hitting emission reduction strategies that really target, again, what I mentioned before, and we've heard it a million times, those highest polluting pieces within the inventory of the entire community. And those are heavy duty vehicles. So those are trucks, of course, prioritizing electric vehicles. And we've included that in the Serp and made sure that that was clear that that's a committee priority. And then there's these 5 that we're going to discuss here in a moment that were highlighted, as you noticed, I'm sure, in the most recent version of the Serp. As we've talked about them, we're close. We're not quite sure whether or not we're including them, but we certainly want to acknowledge that these were discussed and these are still on the table. And that's electric school buses, locomotive switchers operating within the community, and then the 3 main port measures, the zero and near zero technology at the port, tugboat replacement, and marine exhaust intake. And then finally, of course, as I mentioned, there are strategies that are incentive strategies. They're not necessarily to mitigate exposure or reduce exposure. They're really there to support those emission reduction strategies. So these 4 measures support the transition to electric or support the transition to something cleaner. So that would be EV charging stations to plug in your electric vehicle. Mechanic training was a really popular one. That's a new program and something that would support people purchasing electric vehicles and also support really building capacity in the community and really jobs in the community. Heavy duty electric charging infrastructure, which was a new one added to the Serp. It really was a change from the one that said near zero. We changed it to support that, really that drive for just zero emission infrastructure. And then truck idling plugins, again, supports mitigating emissions and supporting that enforcement of anti-idling regulation. So where did we come with all of this? What have we really targeted with all of these different measures that are in the Serp? And that's really where we come here. And I'm just going to show 2 slides. And this first one lists everything that I just listed. It lists everything that's in the Serp right now. And I'm highlighting these 5 as sort of the ones that are still on the table. So as you can see here, and we can certainly revisit this slide as we have this discussion through the rest of the evening, but through this Serp that you guys have all really worked hard toward in the incentives and emission reduction targets type measures, in addition, of course, to the education and the outreach and the enforcement, we target 918 tons of emissions reductions, and that's combined through all of the criteria pollutants, so PM, NOx, and VOCs. And that's really going to take about $37 million based on a lot of these incentive cost per unit, how many we're targeting based on a lot of the feedback we got, and really how we're going to get there throughout implementation. The next slide I'm going to show you is just a look at, we have these 5, technically that they're not yet solidified in the Serp, if that makes sense. They're as options for the committee to kind of finally move into that green bucket, if you will, as we've been moving things around. And this is just to demonstrate, the incentives and emission reduction targets without those. It's a fabulous Serp, as you guys saw through all those emission reduction and exposure reduction measures. So this is still, a good Serp, a lot of emissions reductions, 274 tons. But missing or not including those 5, this just kind of gives you a picture of what those emission reduction targets would look like if we didn't have those heavy hitting, sort of high polluting measures in the Serp. So with that, I know it was kind of a whirlwind, if you will, just kind of taking you through the journey that was 2020. But I just really wanted to, again, acknowledge how great this Serp is, acknowledge all of the work and all of the feedback we got. We certainly have some responses to some of the feedback we got that we are going to go over later. So I don't want you to think we don't have responses for some of those comments. But I also want to acknowledge and pass it back to Erica to acknowledge some of the work we still need to do to move the Serp forward, and I think address a few of those remaining items before we can really support what is ultimately just such great work from everyone. So Erica.
Thank you, Jess. And I just, again, want to take a pause for a second because we've moved so quickly for the last 3 months on this. We've gone double meetings every month, and we've done a lot of work. I want to acknowledge how much work has gotten to this point and just say congratulations on just pulling it all together so far with the 200 pages you've got right now. Phenomenal project, phenomenal effort, great collaboration on all of your parts. So thank you for that effort, for that continued engagement over the last few months. Moving into the next section of our discussion, we have a couple things we can do. As mentioned, there are a couple categories of incentives that we needed to talk about. A lot of information has been shared with you via email with updates since the last meeting. We want to give you an opportunity to talk about that. We also have some very excited people on the line already. I know Gil's here from the school to talk about the buses and any of the other 2 areas. We have people that can speak about those things. So I want to open it up to the CSC. Do you want to talk about the Serp specific measures and descriptive kind of changes that might have been made to the language? Or do you want to talk about the 4 items that are straggling? Or 4 to 5 items that are straggling, those incentives? What is your preference? Because we can go either way. And I will, if somebody can raise their hand or somebody can put in the chat. Looking in the chat, okay. I see Matt's hand.
And Douglas is raising his actual hand.
Oh, hi, Douglas, I see you as well. Actually, Matt, let me go to Douglas briefly just to make sure that he can hear okay and see okay.
Thank you, Erica. Yes, in my understanding, are we in the community suggested measure right now? Because I highlighted like commercial filter, air filter in school for all school, in community school, and 33 unit and allocation amount of 2,640,000. Or 2,640,000 on that. So if that can be changed back and forth, or it's already been set deal already. You know what understand what I'm saying? Jessica raising her, Jessica's shaking her head.
Jessica's shaking her head.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. So
okay.
If I can, to Douglas's question, and really to the broad community as a whole, or committee as a whole rather.
Mhm.
Certainly that is the estimate for what we think it would cost right now to execute that measure and to implement it at all of the schools in the district. However, if as we move forward, and that's something I just kind of want to acknowledge too, I know this seems like it has a feeling of like a final meeting. I think this is like the final meeting of like the preamble to the rest of the work we have to do. So as we move forward, once the SERP is adopted and we dive into these measures, Douglas, if we find the way school filtration is a perfect example, maybe we work with a contractor to implement this measure across all of the schools in Stockton. And we find it costs a little bit more than we allocated, but it's really one of the top measures in the SERP. We can certainly adjust the funding, to make sure that we're implementing it in such a way that it fully satisfies the intent of what we have in the SERP, if that makes sense.
Yes, but the only thing my concern is that you know how many schools within our area, including SSUSD, including the San Joaquin Board of Education, that are charter school private that are not being selected under the jurisdiction with the SUSD as well. That's it.
And maybe I can have someone else speak to this, but at least as far as schools that would be eligible for state funding, 33 is the number of the community. So we're not just targeting 33 schools, we're targeting every school in the community, and the number is 33.
Gotcha. Okay, okay. All right, I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Douglas. And I want to thank you, Matt, for your patience. We wanted to make sure Douglas didn't lose his interpreter before he had a chance to ask his question. I don't see you on the screen, but I do see your hand.
Okay. I would just move to the contentious strategies, or the ones that we didn't approve, because I think we can get through those pretty quickly and spend more time on the talk. And just
I like that.
I know that like we learned a lot about some of them recently, and we got the port emissions inventory, and we had a really great training, and Ryan was there, and thank him for being there. I don't think everybody got a chance to be a part of that, and so there's smart stuff that needs to happen at the port, and I want to support it. I would actually recommend that we table the port strategy for a specific special session so that we can approve the other strategies and then look at the broader document. I don't think it puts it at risk, but I also think a lot of people on here haven't had the benefit of that training and orientation. And I never feel good making a decision on inadequate information. This is something that was shot down twice by vote, and we're re-voting again, which I approve of, so that we can have a nice, good, clean vote. You just don't ever want it to look like we're just voting until we get the answer that we want. So I think there's reasons to approve this. They're just conditions on some of the port stuff that we talked about with Jeff. I think he knows all this, and we all want the best port in California. But I think everybody deserves time to talk about it, and we could talk about it all night tonight, and the rest of the doc really deserves some attention. So I would move that we just table the port strategies and jump to the other split decision strategies so we can put them in the resolved column and look at the bigger doc.
Thanks for that feedback, Matt. I do want to clarify, we did vote once about those, whether those moved in or out, and that they could be discussed again today. So absolutely. I see Mariah's hand and Mary's hand, and we'll take it in that order. And I do see a lot of comments in the chat as well. So thank you all for doing that. Mariah, can you give us your feedback or your question or your thoughts?
Yeah, of course. So I definitely agree with Matt. The meeting that we had earlier today was super informative. And I think that it's really wise for everybody here to get that. But also, I think that the port is creating like a community engagement committee. And I think that talking about the port emission strategy without having a true grasp on what that advisory committee is going to be, I think it's a little premature. I know that we've talked about this quite a bit, but I think that, the folks in this group should have a chance to kind of design that that meeting so that we can make sure that the port is accountable, because like Matt said, we want the best port in California, and we just want to make sure that they're able to be held accountable and not not have us be dismissed as residents and as NGOs. So I see that Jeff is here, and I really appreciate the work that he did earlier, and with CARB and everybody. So yeah, that's all that I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Mary Elizabeth, I see your hand.
Thank you. So I also support the notion that, maybe take a pause on some of that port, and, that there be some means of disclosure on, port commitment to the CEC. So that's now it's even got its own acronym. And so, which, is quite funny because, that hasn't been broadly distributed, those, that whole issue. And I think that, that speaks to the lack of transparency that we continue to find at various levels of the port. And so I think that we do need to have some means that we can continue to monitor and have a meaningful dialogue with the port. And I appreciate your all efforts to facilitate that. Also, one other thing is I would very much like to see, so the locomotive was in, and then, some folks said, okay, we need to vote on that. And so then there was a formal vote. And I would just like to say the same thing about those electric bikes. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Elizabeth. I see Ryan's hand, and I also want to acknowledge that those of you that did not make it to the meeting, I know it was a very last-minute meeting today, there is a recording of that, and there will be a recording shared. So some of that information can certainly be shared. Ryan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, great conversation. And
Ryan, you got muted halfway through your sentence.
I promised I clicked on the unmute, but it just didn't take. I want to thank everybody, and listening to the comments, and I saw Catherine dropped in a comment about the collaborative effort with the port measure, and kind of where that came from. And where that really came from was just listening to the steering committee and how much of a desire there was to have a forum, an opportunity to talk about what was going on at the port, and had discussions with Jeff, and really appreciate his openness and willingness to think about that and what opportunities that there were for that. And so the strategy that's in the Serp is really just reflective of what we heard from the steering committee of wanting to have more community involvement, more resident involvement, like bigger picture vision for it. I mean, I think, and I shared this with Jeff, and that we bring that to the steering committee during the implementation phase, and look to how that committee looks like, what's its goals, what's its objectives. That would be a discussion I think that we could have in a steering committee during the implementation to figure all those things out. Understanding that, with some of the time constraints and limitations, this is kind of gets back to what we talked about several times with the Serp, that we're not going to be able to have all the specific details on a lot of this. And because a lot of this, we want the feedback from the steering committee. I don't want to go behind closed doors, making decisions on how it's going to operate, what it's going to look like, understanding that's going to take time to develop those things. It's going to take discussions with people to do it the right way. And so just very, very thankful for Jeff's openness and willingness. And so that's where that strategy stems from, and hopefully everybody sees it as a positive thing and a positive step in the right direction, moving forward for the port and the community working together on making it the greenest port anywhere in the state.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
On the strategies and postponing the port strategies, maybe just wanted to hear, like, I understand the maybe trying to better understand from you, Matt, or others who and Mariah, you also suggested postponing it. I think this is a great opportunity for those that participated in the meeting and what they heard. I mean, there's a lot of emissions from the port. There's measures that would look to address those. What additional information would the steering committee need or want to I mean, if we're going to put a meeting together, I think it's a conversation where we need to know like what we need to bring to the table.
Yeah. So, you know, when we learned from the rail folks, I realized that we were never going to get clean trains. And so I've changed my position on whether or not I want to allocate funding for switcher engines, right? And so now that I've gotten information about what's going on at the port and the pollution mix out there, you know, maybe there are, you know, they're dealing with international shippers. Maybe there's a way for us to make this bonnet make sense. But there's, you know, there's language around that. Like, why would we provide $2 million for international shipping companies not to upgrade their ships? Maybe we provide this funding for the bonnet, first figuring out where the port's going to find the other 4 to 6 million, or if they have it, and when are they going to get that money? What's the allocation deadline for that? And if we don't get it, then we devolve that money to strategies like the local harbor craft, more zero emission vehicle drayage trucks, more idling infrastructure, or, you know, I mean, there's a ton of things at the port that need attention, and we want to pay for all that. But to give $2 million to something that may or may not materialize just feels loosey-goosey. I don't get to borrow money without proving what I'm going to do with it. So those kinds of things.
Yeah, and we fully understand those concerns. And I think what we could do, like through the implementation phase, we could talk about how we formulate what that would look like, whether there's time commitments for that equipment to get installed in order to receive that funding, or you know, a target date. If they don't get it by a certain date, maybe the amount that's funded is lower every month, or you know, that it's not done, maybe that funding amount drops. Those are conversations that we can have with the steering committee as we're implementing these measures. Obviously the regulation wouldn't kick in until 2027. So basically,
right, we
would hope to at least get 5 years of early emission reductions with a strategy like this. So the incentives are not, incentives are usually the tool that pushes people to make the decision faster than they would normally would.
Yeah, we don't want to wait for at birth. You know I was bringing up at birth a lot, and I don't think anybody wants to wait for that. I also just, you know, I don't want business at this port to be like something we're begging for. Like, this is a special port. Those guys can do a better job when they come here. And I also think some of the bulk stuff we're doing, you know, that with maybe more community support, we can help this port more. I mean, Jeff's here. He comes here and takes a beating when he's the only guy coming here. And so I don't like that process, but I also want his commission to know who we are. Like, some of us go to those commission meetings, and we don't have a ton of confidence that they're going to take a recommendation from some other jurisdiction's report too seriously. And so those, you know, like the CEC in there, we should be able to design that thing and make sure it has some weight to it. And the only thing that gives us any of that weight is the $2 million that we're contending. We're not even beefing over the other money that we want to give to the port. And so this is how negotiations are done. And we can put them in there. Totally, I agree. And we can have some sort of a planned or structured negotiation that moves forward, so that we can help this port with its PR strategy, and taking, the work that Jeff does more seriously. So I just don't know. I just know that putting money in a report that says it goes to this, and without any sort of language clarifying what we're going to do with that, is just clumsy lending. And the other thing that I just want to bring up that I didn't get a chance to bring up today is, those ships could pay a fee for us sucking up their toxins. If they don't want to upgrade and the operation doesn't let them plug in, why wouldn't they pay a fee every time and replenish that revolving loan account that we're putting in there, and that money stays here locally? There are a lot of creative ways to structure something like this, and it doesn't even hit the port in the pocket. And the port's the good guy. shaking down the Pacific world for its hometown of Stockton. So, you know, these are all things that I don't think we should spend all of tonight doing, because we have this huge, robust Serp document that still has other questions, which I think we all agree with Jessica is the doggone best Serp in the state. So let's spend some time on that. And, you know, please don't force me to eat up tonight, pointing out what happened.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you mentioning that, and I agree. I think there's a lot of support for the Serp as it is. Certainly want to be mindful of the time, not only tonight, but then also the timelines. And so, Ryan, you know, as it relates to the fact that the Serp does need to get moved to the Air District Board in a couple of weeks, there is a time crunch that we all have to consider. I want to make sure this committee knows where that lives. I also know that there's 3 hands up. Love to see 2 residents on that list, Mary Elizabeth and Jean. I see you. But first, I want to ask Ryan a quick question about process, because we have talked about making adjustments beyond today. You know, certainly the Serp, if it moves forward to your board, is moving forward on the 18th. And so, you know, having additional conversations about something as significant as the port, if it's not included in this version of the Serp, would need to be re-voted on by the board or some other, you know, there need to be an additional process around this. Can you talk about what that looks like if that doesn't take place today?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely heard from a few people, Matt and Mariah. I think what we probably first want to do is just see, you know, what the desire from the rest of the steering committee. I think we should go through the process and talk about maybe a couple of the measures, like the electric school bus and other things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know what the feelings, because we have a lot of steering committee members on here, what their feelings are, if they want to continue to talk about port measures, or if they're okay with not talking about port measures and want to you know, push that conversation to a later time. We can look at that.
And
Yeah.
if,
Okay.
if I can clarify just really quickly, the board meeting is on the 18th, but we publish our board agenda by law a week ahead of time. And so we would look to have this finalized next Thursday. So it's not like 2 weeks away, it's like a week away. So just in terms of like how many days, that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you, Jess. That is exactly what I was looking for. Mary Elizabeth, then Jean, then Dylan. And those are the order of the hands that I see.
Okay, so thank you. So I agree with Matt. You know, there hasn't been a commitment from the commission. And I think before either, you know, money is allocated, if there's a change in the vote for the locomotive switcher, you know, that as a condition of being included in the Serp, that there is some kind of agreement letter with the companies that are going to be getting this, so that the Port Commission, you know, prepare a commitment letter. Yes, you know, we are on board. We are going to be willing to, you know, put this money, maybe not have, you know, firm dates. You know, that might be a little bit much at this short, late date, but, you know, the same for the switcher, right? And so, you know, that is, you know, something that, yeah, we're willing to work with the community. We're willing, you know, to go through some process, some public process about, you know, improving that. So that's my comment there, that we need to have something formal from those before we, you know, just commit to that much money.
Thanks, Mary Elizabeth. Jean, you have a comment or a question?
Well, it's mostly a comment on the port stuff. You know, we had talked about reducing emissions on the tugboats, and those are private owners. And I've looked into the technology, and I haven't seen anything that is available for electric tugboats, because they have such high horsepower engines. You can't have it self-contained. You'd have to have the power come from someplace else to the tugboat. So, you know, if we're thinking about allocating money to the tugboats, we have to consider, is the state of the art ready for us? And the last thing I wanted to say is, I also urge all of us, because every project has a curve of value. When you start, you haven't done much discussion, it's low value. It increases with time, it reaches a peak. Then after that peak, the value starts declining because you're not adding more useful information, you're burning up time, and you're pushing yourself closer and closer to deadlines. So I beg people to look at that and consider that tonight should be our night to vote on the Serp. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Gene. And I do want to acknowledge a couple comments in the chat, and I will direct them to the Air District staff around the timelines associated with, we've already gotten an extension on the Serp. We are 3 months later than our original plan from the statute. There's questions about allocation of funding and implementation and timing, and whether you lose some of that implementation window if there is delay. So if there could be someone that formulates an answer to that while I take Dylan, Taylor, and Taylor's questions. Dylan, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. And just to address Gene real quick, Jeff did confirm at the meeting earlier today at the CARD meeting that yeah, the technology on tugboats isn't quite there yet. Anyway, regarding I think the port, I think what's happening is and what I addressed at the previous meeting is that there's a real PR issue, and the issue is that. And I know that the Air District wants to get this moving, and we definitely want to get this moving too. And we want the greenest port in America, right? And we want to work with you to make that happen. The issue is that we, as community, attend, these meetings with the port commissioners, and they refuse to read public comment, right? They and then port commissioners are saying stuff like, "What are the complainers saying?" and then they don't read it, and so it makes it disheartening. It makes it feel like we don't know if there's any seriousness about the port actually wanting to work with community, right? We've been here for over a year, right? I mean, we've already filed for an extension. There is no committee yet. We've been here for a year. You have our email addresses. You have our contact information. What makes us believe that the moment we say we vote, hey, we're going to give all this money to the port, that you'll actually contact us, right? As a community, AB 617 was created so that the community could actually have some leverage on their own environment. And that leverage is about to disappear once we vote on this. And we just want a commitment from the port that they're actually going to work with us, and that the community is actually going to have some type of voice, and that there's a real commitment, not just on the community side, but on the port side, to actually become the greenest port in America, or at least become a green port. So I think that's our thing, and we just want some type of MOU or something that the community has the ability to hold them accountable to before we say, here's $10 million, right? That's very painful. So yeah.
So
Okay, couple quick things. I want to acknowledge, and I see Ryan. Oh, Ryan, you wanted to talk, and I saw Jeff's hand briefly. I know there's a lot of conversation about the port, so I wanted to make sure he had the opportunity to weigh in. Ryan, you just pinged?
Yeah, but I feel guilty. I don't want to take, I know Taylor and others have their hands up, so I will wait my turn. Thank you.
Well, Jeff actually was ahead of everybody. He popped up and then popped down, so I did want to give Jeff the chance to say something since he's being referred to quite a bit. Jeff, did you want to jump in here? And Taylor, I do see your hand, and Jeff as well.
Yeah, I hear you, Dylan, and I heard you earlier, and I just wanted, when I started talking about this this outsource or this CEC group, I think from the very beginning the timeline was now. I mean, it was always going to be February, March of this year. So I don't feel like I've been disingenuous there. I feel like that's kind of what we committed to, and we've been working on it. We didn't want it to be something with no you know, we wanted to do our homework. We wanted to figure out what worked. We've been talking to other ports and other outreach groups to find out, you know, the best way to frame this. And then we want to share that with you guys and to provide feedback. So it's not that we don't want to work with you whatsoever. We've just kind of been doing that kind of behind the scenes a little bit. The other thing was that, so when I was talking to Ryan previously about, you know, he maybe it was one of your ideas, but to bring in the CEC into as a Serp measure, I said, absolutely. We have every intention to being committed to it and to working through this process. And that's why I had no hesitancy whatsoever in including it into the Serp as well. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered all your questions, but I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'll defer to Ryan or Jess on whether they're responding to one of those recent comments or if they would like to take Taylor's question.
Let Taylor talk.
All right, Taylor, you're up. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah, I want to echo some of the sentiments that have been shared by my fellow steering committee members, but also add on that I don't think that discussion of the port is the only thing that needs to be addressed in this Serp. I think there's some actually very deep structural problems with it. And this is going to be our implementation document for the next 4 years. And I want to make sure I understand that like we are on a deadline, and I want to make sure that we reach that deadline. But there's a relatively small amount of language that can be added to make this a more structurally sound document during implementation. So I have 2 comments around that. The first is this absolutely needs to include a technical advisory group. That's something that's recommended in the blueprint implementation, like for this legislation, and it's not unheard of. It's not even unusual. It's incorporated at Fresno and Long Beach, Richmond, West Oakland, Imperial, other AB 617 communities. And I'll just speak from like my experience on this steering committee is that I've felt a bit at sea and confused and ill-equipped in multiple parts during this past year to make decisions about strategies, to do like authentic like cost-benefit analysis on what strategies we should choose versus others, and certainly around the allocations of budget. You know, like what is the cost-benefit of analysis around like how we spend our money. This is like a one-time infusion of money into the community that we rarely get to see. So again, just want to double down on the fact that like this is an enormous opportunity that does not come all that frequently to the community. And we need to make sure that the tool by which we implement it is as robust as possible. And to point to other parts of this process where I actually saw a technical advisory group would have added value. I think about like CARB's input at the very beginning of this process in the first few months when they like had an enormous amount of like technical expertise that they brought to the steering committee. I thought that was really helpful. And then for the past 9, we haven't really seen as much of it. And like the one exception to that, I think, was, you know, when rail strategies were being discussed, many CSC members required information that should have been readily available. But instead of a number of individuals on the CSC had to reach out directly to CARB just based on the fact that they happen to have relationships there to weigh in on rail strategies. And they answered a lot of questions that made us a lot more comfortable voting on these measures. And based on the last 12 months, what I've seen not work, what I've seen work, I anticipate that we're going to need even more technical handholding as we assess the effectiveness of Serp strategies and camp monitoring. Which my second point is around the camp. It just has not been sufficiently integrated into the Serp. The grant provides invaluable information on the feedback on the efficacy of these Serp measures, and the Serp should absolutely be flexible based on what the camp. There should be like a feedback loop there, right? Like we should be able to say like this is working. We should validate that we have chosen this path, or a year from now when we have like a bunch of camp data that suggests that maybe this was the wrong path, that we're not beholden to it, and then we have reasons to move from it. So without the intentional inclusion of an independent technical advisory group in the camp, I just don't think the Serp is currently in a state that can or should be approved. And I would like to go into next week with some revised language. Again, like it needs to be a relatively small amount of language that would add a lot of integrity to the document. And a further point of that, we turned in our Serp documentation on Monday evening, or at the latest on Monday evening. We received information about the port, like a lot of technical analysis about the port later that evening. So we couldn't even incorporate it in our comments. And since then, I have not seen a new Serp that is revised based on what I saw, what I submitted as feedback to the document. Like, I don't know what I'm voting on tonight. Like, I haven't seen the document in front of me. So like, I just do not feel prepared to vote on this because I don't have the document in front of me because there's structurally missing parts of this.
Thank you for your comments, Taylor. And I heard there were quite a few of them. They were all really incredibly valid. And I want to turn it to Jess and Ryan. Jess specifically, I think, because she's been doing a lot of the hands-on day-to-day edits to the Serp. And I think she referenced that she did get your comments, but I want to refer to Jessica for that to see how we can talk about at least the latest draft of it and the timeliness of those comments being integrated.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. And Taylor, it was fortuitous that I get to go after you because that is actually why I raised my hand earlier, to acknowledge a couple of the really key comments. And I, like I said, I do have responses and ways that we will and have already integrated some of those comments into the Serp. But to address the comments, and I'm seeing a lot of chat about the technical advisory group. I think what we're seeing and what we've seen that work in Fresno, and we are 100% on board with and actually think needs to happen, is instead of one technical advisory group that's in charge of technical information for several strategies that span several different types of technologies and several different types of expertise, is we've found it works with subcommittees. And I think that's what you're referring to, at least when you referred to Fresno, where we have meetings that specifically dive into the technical analysis of, we have an air monitoring team, which I know we have here, the camp subcommittee, but specifically talk about vegetative barriers. There is a group of people that are working through technical analysis of the vegetative barriers as one example of strategy in Fresno. And that certainly is something we see and needs to happen for implementation of the Serp to be successful. And so I think with that recommendation, we can certainly find a place to 100% include how that implementation is going to work and how the committee will continue to be the most integral part of implementation through subcommittees, including bringing technical expertise to those subcommittees. And then to your second point, and maybe I'll let Ryan, I saw Ryan had his hand up too. I think you're right. There was one piece missing in that feedback loop because I believe the camp mentions how the camp will be used to inform the Serp, but there is not language that I can think of right now, to your point, Taylor, that kind of completes that loop and talks about how the Serp and the camp are integrated with one another. And so I think addressing that is certainly two big things that we can, like you said, with minimal language, certainly include and address, while the rest of the Serp hopefully can stand and based on a lot of the other discussion we plan to have tonight, be supported with just integration of those two concepts. The third thing I wanted to mention that's kind of been brought up about the port technologies, but really is applicable to all of these strategies, is a lot of the desire from the committee and really the push for what we keep calling those first of its kind or unique measures is to sort of push technology in ways, right? We talked about how we don't just want, a lot of Taylor's comments and specifically talked about, we don't just want near zero, we want zero emission, right? And so to Jean's point, certainly maybe there are technologies that aren't quite there, but including them as maybe the priorities or focusing on those technologies over certain technologies in the Serp over the next 5 years can really help drive the adoption of those technologies. So we really think it's important to keep in mind, the Serp is a guide and a roadmap of how we can get people to adopt those technologies and take advantage of those funds and really work with the CSE to make sure that it's implemented in the way that is intended. So I'll just stop there, but I'll let Ryan if he had more to add.
Just does a great job of raising those points, and I'm sure you saw this, Taylor. We did add language in there, talked about the use of the camp data to help inform the strategies and to constantly bring that information back to the steering committees and to keeping them apprised and updated, similar to what we're doing in Shafter and South Central Fresno as we're collecting this information. And then at the same time, taking feedback and thoughts and ideas that the community steering committee members have on where to utilize things like our mobile monitoring van that we already have and deploy in South Central Fresno and Shafter. Want to cover real quick on the port measures. I think there's this conception that as soon as we get the okay, we're going to spend all this money and not have any more follow-up or discussion with the steering committee. Each of the port measures actually requires a development of a project plan. So I mean, and what we've done in Fresno and in Shafter, when we have these project plans, we actually work on them. We show them to the steering committee so they can have input into them, because these are what ultimately gets submitted to CARB, where they have to approve these. So it wouldn't be like if we have dollar amounts in the Serp, it's not like from day one we're just going to spend that money. There's still going to be ample opportunity to continue to discuss whether or not ultimately those things are funded. Now, hopefully the case can be made that, hey, there's significant emission reductions there. We should do this, but understand the concerns that the steering committee has. So, but I want you to know though, that just because there may be dollar amounts affixed to that, there would still be the conversation with the committee before we actually move forward. And there's other discussions about how we go about paying for those things that like, the kind of the suggestion that I had, or the possibility of, putting some conditions on that it's got to be installed by certain dates in order to get the money, things like that. But we can be innovative, working together with the steering committee. My thing is, I just had a picture of the strategies without the dollars. If we table them, pull them out, I think that's probably what we would look to have the steering committee approve, in which case those things wouldn't be in there. That funding wouldn't be dedicated in there. So that's where I want to maybe hear a little more from the steering committee. I would like, and I think it's a good idea to have it in there. And then just with everybody's understanding that we're still going to be talking about it. It's not like we get it approved and we're day one, here you go, Port, here's $5 million, go spend it. There's going to be conversations, lots of conversations with the steering committee before that money gets spent there. And like I said, with the project plans needing to get developed, that's at least a 2-month process before CARB has been turning those around. So, and during that time, steering committees obviously will be able to see and provide feedback on the incentive project plans that we submit. So it's definitely a very interactive process.
Thank you, Ryan. And speaking of CARB, I do see Karen's hand. Karen Buckley with CARB, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Erica. I just wanted to follow up on what Ryan was saying and to just remind everybody that it is kind of like a feedback loop from monitoring, from emissions inventory and monitoring. We take all of that information and then it kind of just goes back into the SERP, and we can make changes, make adjustments in funding amounts or moving it to a different category. It's more than likely the monitoring is going to show us the trends that we're seeing based on the regional monitors as well. And if it doesn't, that's when we look at doing something different. If something shows that's out of the ordinary, then we take action, right? So I think that the monitoring piece will continue to build our knowledge of the air quality that's in the region. So there's that piece of it. And then with incentives, even for port strategies, they don't get 100% funding of any item. And all the incentives all work, they have to pay a certain percentage. And then then your incentive dollars would go and pay for the rest of it. Now, they could choose not to participate and not apply, because they have to apply for the funding. They don't just automatically get a check. So there's that part. They have to agree. It is a contract, so they do agree to certain things that go with it. So there is that part as well. Now, you guys can, the district and the steering committee can decide if they want to have something in the contract that is a little bit different, that makes it a community identified project. So there are various pieces that you can write into the SERP now in order to move forward. So I just wanted to add that to help Brian out a little bit and to maybe just clarify a little bit of it. It's all interconnected and it is confusing. I see that. And Taylor, I really appreciated your comments that you were making there. So I hope some of that is helpful.
Thank you, Karen. I see Ned's hand. Ned, I haven't heard much from you today. Ned, do you want to give us your feedback?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, just a real quick comment. You know, what can we do to put into the SERP document that will allow it to go forward where we can fortify the case that there really will be continuing involvement, monitoring, ability to affect changes? In other words, like many people, I'm not so sure about some of these measures, but if we can put in writing our strong concerns about having better cost benefit analysis, really we have none, health studies that are reasonable, and that we reserve the right to change the preference of these allocations. So it's right in the document that goes to the board and goes to CARB. Maybe that gives us some solace. So I would appeal to the people on the steering committee. Can't we come up with a paragraph or two that forcefully reserves and documents our right to revise, our need for better information, especially cost benefit information in health? And it's like with the port, there are many questions. So we have to get better information, but we also have to move things along. So what can we put in a paragraph or two that would reserve those rights to us? Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. And I see some agreements, a number of agreements with that in the chat. And I just want to be mindful of what's in the chat. And then I see your hand, Matt. So just one question, just 1 second while I confirm. Kyle's got some notes from Karen's comment about CARB, and then there's a little bit of agreement around, is there language? And so I'll turn it, before we go to Matt, I'll turn it to the Air District team to answer that question. Is that an option to put in some additional bolstering language in the SERP that acknowledges the unknowns and gives flexibility during implementation to make adjustments, to modify funding, and to put in criteria? It sounds like things like an MOU, other operating agreements with some of these other agencies and organizations. Is that an option? And I'm asking that directly to the Air District team in light of some of the supporting comments in the chat and Ned's note. Jess says yes, that is an option. So
go ahead, Ryan.
I don't know. That's not something that we've done. It's not something that, you know, a lot of this process, we talk about trust, and obviously the desire to want to work towards and build trust between the district, the other partners that are here that are participating. You know, obviously we're going to be held accountable by what we said, you know, through this process. And if anybody's unhappy with what we're doing, they can go to people and talk about how we've broken trust by not, you know, sticking to what we said. I could just tell you from experience. And I mean, if people want to reach out and talk to steering committee members from the other communities that we've dealt with in South Central Fresno and Shafter, they can tell you exactly how we've approached this, and that it has been very involved in working directly with the steering committees. And we've made that commitment in these meetings. They're videotaped, they're on record, they're on file.
What's wrong with putting it in writing, Ryan?
Yes. What's that?
What's wrong with putting it in writing, Ryan? I mean, you're a good guy. I trust you, and I know what's going on. But to have a paragraph or two that clearly states we are going to be involved, we want some more information, I mean, that provides a lot of solace. And you know what? It fortifies all the good things you say orally, because it's important to put things in writing.
Okay.
Erica, do I have permission to speak yet?
Hi, Matt. Yes, absolutely. I think that dialogue's done. Yes, you're good.
Yeah, cool. So I think Karen kind of covered, you know, obviously there's a monitoring feedback loop on implementation that just needs to be a little clearer in the document. Ned's now got us looking at, you know, formal oversight of everything that the Air District does. And, you know, this isn't where I wanted this to go. I think it's, you know, in principle, the best thing in the world, but I'm not qualified to do the Air District's job. You know, I didn't want that for every Serp strategy. You know how to run clean cars in the San Joaquin. I don't. I just wanted your help getting a respectful agreement from the Port of Stockton that has problematic history that we can't help you with your March 18th deadline. So they're in here. So that's why I was asking for a set aside meeting so that we could set some really narrow descriptions. And we're now 1.5 into this meeting or more, and we're still on the port. So, you know, I hope there is some sort of governance process that can let us just sort of step out of the content, vote on setting this aside, picking a Tuesday or Wednesday meeting to beat Jessica's deadline, to talk about how we can approve the port strategies that you all recommended. Because, I mean, that's what some of us want to do. And I want to get back to approving the rail that seems to have been moved to approved, but I don't remember ever approving it, but I want to, and some of the other contentious strategies. So that we can move forward to getting down to the structural issues that Taylor brought up that I think would be the best use of our time in this meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. And I appreciate the opportunity for everybody to get their voice heard. And I do see a number of comments in the chat that I want to acknowledge. You know, there's a number of things that I think we've heard. Some people didn't want to talk about the port, but we did talk quite a bit about the port measures. There are two other measures to discuss. They're buses and locomotives that are in a different category. And I want to acknowledge that there is another hour for us to go through those and to make sure that we do have that conversation. They have not been greenlit officially to move into the Serp, so certainly we can have that conversation today. And I do think that we've got a school district rep on the line as well, and Gil, that I want to give time to speak about. So it was interesting that we talked about, do we want to talk about these measures yet? And we sort of did talk about these measures, and there's certainly the opportunity for us to table that port conversation if that is what the group would like to do. Douglas, I see your hand. I want to move there, and then let's go back to the other two measures that I think we haven't talked too much about yet, that I do think it was 6:30 was exactly my time when I wanted to really get into those other measures and make sure we had enough time for it.
Okay. Yes, I'm a little confused what Matt is trying to convey, because I wasn't there at the meeting, and I believe Scott from CAR was supposed to let me know in the meeting regarding a summary of what's been said during, because they didn't have, it was last minute for interpreter. So I don't know what he's fighting. The way I see his body language, talking about what he had learned from the early meeting, and I don't think he can get on board with him, because I'm a little confused what he's saying regarding the prior meetings, that we would like to know what's been said and what was the outcome that they found. That's all, because I'm a little curious. That I was told that Scott was going to let me know what's been said due because of the lack of an interpreter earlier then. Thank you.
Can I just respond briefly?
Well, Matt, if you don't mind, just because I did have a discussion with Douglas, and I also heard from several other committee members that could not make the meeting this morning, concern about not being able to make the meeting. And so I did say that we would talk about what was discussed in that meeting earlier today. And so my understanding was that at some point that we were going to open up a little bit of a discussion and let committee members share what their thoughts or kind of what they learned through the meeting. But I'll let Ryan, did you want to address that anymore? No? Okay. All right, Matt.
Yeah, Doug, we just learned a lot about the complexities of operating a port and how little we know about it. And so unfortunately, we're in the 12th month of this story, and we're kind of getting our first real information that really should be used to make an informed choice. And unfortunately, that wasn't part of the orchestration of this Serp design process. And it was something that, you know, I just asked some people at CARB, can you explain this to me? And it kind of snowballed into a community or a steering committee wide education ritual. Ideally, it would have been something that was either handled within a normal agenda, within the normal framework of all this. The Air District has been asked to do more than a year's worth of work in a year, which really goes back to the usefulness of an independent science advisory or technical advisory group who can run these errands out of cycle and come back on the big questions that frankly, neither CARB nor the Air District know the answers to. So Doug, we were trying to get some information about how to approve this Serp, because I don't want to be sitting here in June talking about approval. I want to be moving to implementation and giving Gil money to seal up and filter schools. Like that's my highest priority. Like $2 million for the port's bonnet is not my fight. Like I want to support that port. I'm also not going to make a decision under duress because of an arbitrary timetable set by a legislature that didn't know what they were talking about before a pandemic, right? This was not a thorough enough process for such a meaningful impact in Stockton. So it is an opportunity to salvage our relationship with the port and to build something with the Air District. And I mean, we could have just voted and we could have just had, you know, we can pull this off in an hour-and-a-half meeting on a Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, and we can still meet that March 18th deadline. And I think, you know, like the agenda submittal deadline for a week early, you know, is that your Brown Act publishing deadline? Because Brown Act has apparently, you know, given all the boards freedom to ignore public comments and change all sorts of Brown Act criteria. Maybe the board could work with us on having 2 or 3 days to have this training. It's just.
Okay, Matthew, thank you so much for letting me know, because I wanted to be there to see what was the thing, the concern about the port. So great, thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you, Douglas, for the question. For those of you that were not able to participate in that port meeting, you kind of got a summary and a lot more of a conversation than I think we thought we might have. But again, this is your meeting and we want to make sure you have the opportunity to say what you'd like to say. That being said, I do want to flag, there's 2 hands I see, Ryan and then Jonathan, and then we're going to have a conversation about what goes next. Like we need to talk about more than just support measures. There are 2 others, as I mentioned, including Gil from the schools. So we want to make sure we have a chance to get to him.
Yeah, I think at this point, definitely hear the steering committee and the comments and chats. Definitely see that people want to go ahead and postpone and have a further discussion about the port measures. We could probably look to do that next Tuesday if that is something that the steering committee is open to. Tuesday night. The other issue that I see that's come up is about delays and reallocation of money. What I shared in last the steering committee was just the timelines that we have to spend the funds. That's the big thing, where funds could possibly be reallocated if it would get to the point where we know we're not going to be able to spend the funds on the measures that are in this Serp. So whatever money that we have committed in here, we have committed for that time frame. We plan on keeping the steering committee up to date on where we're at with spending those funds, getting feedback if we're not spending funds in certain areas where we need to, and then getting additional feedback. But if we start getting close to the point where we have to spend money in other disadvantaged communities because this money was given us to spend in any disadvantaged community, that there's a potential of that if we're not able to spend it on the measures in the timelines in state law. So that's the only time that we would look to do that. We wouldn't look to do it otherwise.
Thank you.
Hopefully I saw that was one of the questions about what obviously the delaying anything, it just shrinks the time period that we have to work on working with people to spend this money, because it's going to be challenging. I'm not trying to make it sound like this is going to be some easy process. Thankfully we have partners like Gil and some of the others that have talked about their capabilities of doing it, but just definitely want to be honest with the steering committee about those things.
Thanks, Ryan. I see Jonathan's hand, and then we're going to transition a little bit and tell you about what we're going to spend our last hour on.
I'd like to motion to table port measures.
That's where we're going next.
Second that.
Excellent.
I'll second it.
I think we've got a motion and a second, and we don't have a formal voting process prepared for this motion, so we'll take an informal one. We've got consensus to kind of hold the port conversation for another potential date. If you'd like to raise a physical hand or a blue hand, and if we see that we've got more than 50%, that would be fantastic. If you're not on camera, raise your blue hand, and if you are on camera, raise your actual hand, and we'll make a note of the 50%, and I'll note who has that option. Excellent. Those of you that have voting rights, please make sure. It looks like we've got more than 50% looking to table. So we will table that conversation for potentially, it sounds like a meeting on the Tuesday next week, which could be a little less than a week from now. Look for additional information from the Air District about that. Support to table port additional conversations until then. You don't have to apologize to us, Jonathan. It's certainly not our intent to direct this committee in any way. The port conversation is an absolutely important conversation to have in whatever structure and timing you want to. And if we can get this meeting done on Tuesday and it fits within the timeline of the Air District Board, we are grateful and happy that you guys have met your timeline. This is your timeline and your Serp. So mindful of that, and know that that is always that's where our head is always will be. With that in mind, I'm going to ask the ILG team to pull up two more, the slides from before, to show you the two other measures that we want to talk about. There are locomotives and school buses. And those are important topics that were discussed briefly at the last meeting. And there was a lot of support for bringing it back to this committee to have this kind of dialogue. And so in the spirit of time, let me tell you what we'd like to do. I was thinking about 6:30 was about when we'd start to cut that port conversation, so you guys are reading my mind. One thing we have noticed at the ILG team is every time the port is on the agenda, the port is really on the agenda. And so we allow a lot of time for you guys to talk about it and really get a sense of what you want to say there. But we did want to allocate the last hour to really give at least some time to talk about the school buses and the locomotives, let's say for about half an hour. And then we really do go in and vote on the Serp. I want you to think about this in two different ways. The Serp, as it stands alone, has none of these measures in it. Right now, it's a great Serp. You guys said it's the best Serp in the state without school buses, locomotives, or port measures in it. The conversation we're going to have next is whether or not school buses and locomotives should be added tonight to that Serp. In the draft that you've seen, the language is already included for you to consider and for you to review. And we have it available tonight for you to look at and discuss. And what I'd like to do is find out if, let me take the, can you unscreen share, please? Just get a pulse from the cameras that I can see and from the chat that I can see. Let's start with school buses. And is Gil still on the line?
Yes, I am.
He's here.
I'm here.
Oh, hi there. Hi, Gil. All right, so you gave us a little bit of a briefing at the last meeting. There was a lot of support, certainly from your agency, and then I think there was quite a bit of support from the CSC around school buses. And so do you want to just give us 2 seconds on school buses and just recap for anybody that wasn't at the meeting or doesn't recall, and then we can have a little bit of a chat about school buses and whether or not we want to bring that into the Serp for discussion tonight.
Sure, I'd love to. First of all, I think for the committee members, I think it's good news. Stockton Unified is a good grant partner and ally. I think we're somebody that can really help out. We were one of 3 recipients of the CMIS grants through CARB. And so El Monte Unified, San Diego Unified, and Stockton, they got 9.7, 9.8, and then we got $4.9 million. Originally, it was only going to be 10 million, but they came up with extra money. So we're not sore at all that we were 3rd place in that. And that's kind of how the money rolled out. But we are excited about what we've done. So our grant is a mini microcosm of what you guys are doing. We have battery electric riding lawnmowers. We have a $1.8 million infrastructure that we completed. We have 4 CARB buses, and then we've parlayed other grants. We've gotten 2 buses from the California Energy Commission, and we've gotten 5 buses from San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control. That, along with PG&E rebates, we've added up to make it almost $8.2 million. So why am I asking about different things? Because we've created an infrastructure for 24 buses. And so we're looking for the next 11 buses to fill the yard. And I think what you've got to realize too is that even though we all started at the same time, El Monte and San Diego Unified are a year and a half behind us. So I'm pleased to tell you that March 25th, we'll receive our 4 CARB buses, and we will receive the 2 CEC on April 8th. So literally a year from the time that we start out, we've built an infrastructure. We did the PO process. We did a construction process. We did all the different things that you have to do. And we've done it in less than a year. And I don't think any other school district in the nation has ever done that. And so realize part of what we're doing is we have community outreach. I put in the chat our energy patrol. That's a student energy patrol. It teaches our kids about energy conservation. Other things about Stockton Unified, we have 60% of our sites have solar on them. So we're saving energy. We're being good stewards. We have 2 battery storage systems. And all of this on our energy conservation website, you can look up and see. And so this CARB grant that we've done, we're miles ahead. We're a year and a half ahead of the other 2 competitors, and they got twice the money. Now they're going to get more buses, but we've built the infrastructure to support it. So what I'm looking for is, I think you originally had, forgive me because I'm catching up on your numbers and budgets, but we do have experience spending these money, staying in the right buckets, and doing what we're supposed to do. If you have money of $10 million for heavy duty trucks, like we've talked about, think about investing in Stockton Unified. We're going to affect probably we have 40,000 students total, but we'll be affecting 25,000 students within your given area. So you are doing that with the buses and reducing emissions around kids in schools, around all those students. So it's not just one homeowner, or it's not just one filtration system in one school. It's all these things. And we can help with filtration and all those other things too. Check out the Energy Patrol video, because that's what we want to do about reducing greenhouse gases. We'll be your best ally and advocate. So here's the thing. If we were to get 13 buses, that would cost about $5.3 million. But instantly, we could get those reductions happening in an infrastructure that's already there in less than 6 months. Now, my promise would be a year, because that's accurate and we've done it. But I know, because we've already started the process, we could get buses in 6 to 8, 9 months max. So again, it's not something that's going to take years to develop over this lifetime. We have a $4.94 million budget, and we are going to spend and get reimbursed for $4 million of it by next month. And so realize we're a good ally that spends the money, gets the stuff done, meets the deadlines, and beats all expectations. So, and we can help with community outreach. We're already going to partner with you guys for the air monitoring stuff. And I am your main contact for the district. And so I can follow up on all those things. I know the systems. I'm the energy manager, energy education specialist. We do curriculum stuff for the kids. We have a Merlot Institute of Environmental Technology. There's all these things that we're doing. And so, I just want to challenge you guys. Anything you want to know, you can reach me on my email, anything you want to see on the website. But from our standpoint, and I'm a little biased, it's a slam dunk. We will reduce emissions. And I gave you even the sheets that, you can compare it to yours, but my form of work that my guys wrote up, for 13 buses, you would save 2.57 metric tons of CO2 emission. That's more than you're trying to get on the whole system or this whole program. And so again, 13 buses and immediately fulfill your requirements of emission reductions. And I'm welcome to take any questions whatsoever. We would use our Energy Patrol to do the same thing for you guys on this part of it if you can allocate money to us. We would love for you to believe in us and trust us and work with us, because we look forward to do that. We've done it on this grant, and we'd like to collaborate with you guys now to do it even better for the Stockton community. Thank you.
Thank you, Gil. That was a really fantastic overview, and I think there are a lot of questions in the chat. I'm not sure if you can see it. I will read you a couple of them, and I'll go in reverse so that I can do it quickly. There's a note that the school buses do stay in the community, which is an important comment to make. And there's some specific questions about, what bus times hours per day are those buses driving in Stockton compared to heavy trucks? I don't know if you can answer that question related to Jean's comment. And I do see that there's a few different questions. I'll ask the committee while I'm skimming through the chat. Would you like to see the language that's dropped into the Serp? Because we do have that, and then we can have that on the screen while Gil's answering some of his questions. I'm seeing a couple head nods. Okay, let's Hannah, let's put those. Let's put that bus measure changes onto. Thank you. So on the screen is the language that would be proposed to be included in the Serp if you choose. And it speaks to some of the details that are currently in the Serp and the amount of money, $400,000 each for 10 diesel school buses. And then, Gil, there are a number of questions in the chat, which I can't see at the moment, but I think you might be able to, if you have the ability to answer some of those, I'd appreciate it. And then just as a form of process, there was a question about why are we bringing this up again? We did have a conversation about this at the last meeting, and there was a lot of interest in bringing it back to the committee today to reconsider. After looking at the budget, and I think hearing from Gil and talking about the excitement around that partnership, there was certainly CSC interest in reconsidering. And given that there's no defined guidelines in terms of what is and is not in those red, yellow, green buckets, we can pull items, out of red and move them into green. We did bring it back at the CSC request. So that is why this item and the other three are included in our conversation today.
You were asking, they made the comment, and I totally agree. Our buses go back and forth. Not only that, you guys are looking at air monitoring. We are now affecting the air quality in the transportation yard and at schools. So it's extremely important that that air quality is good. I don't know about private school buses, but again, we're telling you what we would spend it on, how we would do it, and we can tell you what schools are being affected and how many students exactly. The buses run in the morning, and they, depending on the routes, because of COVID, they're going to have to run a lot more. And so there's going to be fewer people on these buses. So we've added 11 buses total in our fleet, and we could use 13 more would fill it. And that's the number I gave you. But it really is about just reducing greenhouse gases and about using all our vehicle miles traveled that now are on electric buses instead. So we use them on the heaviest routes we can do and use them for as many miles as we can do, because that's what helps our reporting and reduces our emissions. The other thing is, like, we've done lawn and garden equipment. We have 3 riding mowers that actually have 5-foot blades on them. And the other advantage of going green with that is you don't have to deliver gas out to the sites anymore. And now it's quieter. The decibel rating is almost half of what a normal mower is. And so again, these students now don't have to be listening to that outside their windows when they're testing or special needs kids or anything else. And we're going to use the Energy Patrol to tell this story. And I really encourage all of you, if you haven't seen the Energy Patrol video, it's 4th graders telling you how to turn lights off and save money and water leaks and what you should do to help. And so that's great.
Thanks, Gil. And I think I saw you put that link in the chat, which is awesome. So if those of you want to take a look at that video, please do. And then to fund 11 buses, Irene, if you look online, it looks like we're funding 10, and it would be $400,000 each, so it'd be $4 million. But I do think $400,000 per bus is what the price or what the allocation is proposed currently in the Serp. So I would like to fast track this because I'm sensing a lot of support for it. There's still some questions in the chat. I'm going to give Gil the opportunity to answer directly. But I want to hear from somebody who does not think this item should be added. If there is anyone that feels like it is not a good idea to add buses to this discussion. I haven't seen anybody that dissents, but I want to acknowledge there might be somebody that's been quiet so far. I'm not seeing any hands, and I'm not seeing any definitive no's either. I feel like that is a consensus as far as I am concerned with the 50% plus one. I'm not seeing even one person that is fully against it yet. Regina, I see your comment, and I acknowledge your sort of ambiguity around it. I think that's a vast majority of people that are supportive of putting that measure in. I don't think that we need a formal vote. We can certainly incorporate it into the Serp when we do the Serp formal vote later in this meeting. So what I am seeing right now based on, let me stop the screen share just to make sure I'm not missing anyone's hands or missing anyone's visuals or seeing any, and I'll ask Hannah and Kim to keep me honest, but I don't see anybody that is acknowledging that they want to not include this.
We have a comment from Mary Elizabeth.
We see you, Mary
Hi,
Elizabeth.
Mary Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's why I always ask for people to keep me honest.
I've been trying, you know, I asked for the miles, and why we took it out in the first place is because, you know, the miles that those vehicles travel are very small compared to some other miles. And so we were talking about, you know, the big trucks and, you know, that are on the road all day long, and versus, you know, a operation that is, you know, very short-lived. And, you know, if we were transporting all of the students in Stockton Unified as in years past, you know, I would be all for it, but we're only looking at elementary and special ed. And I know that that's very important, but, you know, we have many students that are on the RT buses.
I think one thing to realize, though, is that the director of transportation is no longer there. They're working as much as they can to kind of redo routes, and it will still be running. I mean, COVID means that we need more buses and less people on it. So our fleet isn't going to grow double the size, and yet what we're doing is electric buses. And you know, the heavy duty trucks, those are running out of the area most of the time. They're not necessarily in the community. And so why not spend the dollars in your own community for your own kids in those community? So, you know, I just would like to point that out, that this does stay here. And we've gained national attention on this program for what we've accomplished in 1 year. And we will fill the yard with buses. I just like it to be a collaborative where these funds are being used to show how the emission reductions get to where they need to be. But I can even on our website, you can look up, there's national webinars that have noticed Stockton. So to show that we're all coming together as a community and really compiling all our resources, I think we deserve to be shown in a light that is positive, especially nationwide. This story, I was on a webinar in October or July, both of them, there's two, and we got national attention for this. And Governor Whitman from New Jersey was all over it. And so I just think it shows that California, you know, other than New York and LA, Stockton should be on the roadmap. We should. We're doing a very good thing, and we need the help to fill the yard. There's 13 buses that we don't have.
Thank you, Gil. There's a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to ask you to put in that answer in the chat if you can, and I'm going to go to Ryan, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, I'll keep this real short. So obviously, Gil touched on it a little bit. One of the biggest benefits with measures like electric school buses are you see the direct reduction in toxic air contaminants, really where it's needed the most around kids, not only just at the schools, but while they're in the vehicles as well. So there's benefits beyond just the emission reductions associated with the transition to electric school buses.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so we are at 7 o'clock. And I want to be really thoughtful about what we've heard so far and where we need to go for a number of items. One that we want to do is we want to take advantage of the vast majority of the CSC members that are here right now today. And so we definitely want to acknowledge that even without the extra 4 or 5 measures related to the port, the buses, and the locomotives, that there's a Serp to be voted on. And that takes a little bit of time. And then we've now heard that we want to table the port measures That's fine. And it sounds like we've got a lot of support for the electric bus measures. And so we still have a conversation that needs to happen around locomotives, and there's still some conversations we can have about how many changes have been incorporated and all the logistical, technical details that have been added based on the feedback you all provided. I want to be really thoughtful about your time. I want to be thoughtful about the votes that we need to take. We need to approve a Serp today, or vote on a Serp today. You can approve it or not, but you need to vote on a Serp today that is moved forward so that you can even have additional discussions about the port. And I want to be thoughtful about the people that want to do that and have said that they want to do that. And I'm comfortable moving that forward based on some of the comments I've seen and some of the feedback that we've received. I would like to hear if there is any specific concern around this general direction. We haven't gone through and looked at every one of the changes that Jessica outlined that you all have made. She did go in and make a lot of changes based on your feedback, based on all the insights and input that you've all provided in the last 2 months. It's all incorporated, and she has a slide-by-slide comparison of what those changes are. Would you like to see some of those changes, or do you feel confident that you have seen she has incorporated those based on some of the feedback that you've given? Any thoughts on that? And I do see your hand, Ned and Jean. Ned, do you want to go?
Well, what I'd like to do is actually make a motion so that it's very concrete, which is to reaffirm that we've tabled the port, approve the Serp, but with the addition of a paragraph that recites really what Ryan said orally and what we discussed, namely that our steering committee is going to be involved. There's an expectation that we'll have more technical information. We'll have cost benefit studies. We'll try and get health studies. Just one paragraph reciting the promises that have been made. And then I would make the motion that we could move the Serp forward subject to that condition.
Thank you, Ned. Jean.
I like the idea of the school buses. I don't know if it's necessary at this point to fund 10 of them. I would say, let's have school buses in the Serp and we can decide later the number. I think we need to also now move on to the switchers at 7 o'clock. I do believe we need to take a vote tonight. We have to make our 7:30 deadline.
Agree. Thank you for that. I haven't heard from Debbie today, and then I'm going to go to Taylor and Matt. Debbie? If you're speaking, Debbie, I cannot see your...
Yeah, I'm trying to talk off my mute button. I was just, there was something that I was concerned with that I bring up almost at every meeting that I attend. And so I just sent an email during this meeting, a little short email to the air district about what I'm concerned with, and it's just about green space. But I just want to make a comment about how I think that everything is in the Serp, that Jessica has put stuff in there as we have come along. Because I've only missed 2 meetings, so I've been at from the very, very beginning. And I just think she's done an excellent job of catching everything. And I don't know how you kept up, but everything seems to be in there. So I do appreciate that. And I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Debbie. I think she does have, 20 or 30 slides that speak to all the changes that she got from all of you, even up until today, that acknowledge some of those comments and incorporated all of those. And so for those of you that did send them in, and if you didn't see them on a slide, know that there is a slide out there, I think, somewhere that does reference that. I do see Matt and I see Taylor, but I want to give Ryan a chance to reference something just because I know he might have something that has pinged up. Ryan, did you have something, or you want to let Matt and Ryan go ahead or Matt and Taylor go ahead if it's not tied to a recent comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk to Ned's comment, and we can definitely put that language together and include that in the SERP document.
Okay, so we've got a motion from Ned that's tabled. If anyone wants to second that, that's absolutely something we can do. I see
Doug, I'll second it.
Doug is going to second. Great, thank you. Let me get to Taylor and Matt.
Ned kind of beat me to requesting sort of a formal acknowledgement of this oversight role moving forward. I also think, you know, we've just seen that we don't have the trust we want. We're getting there, and we don't have the capacity to evaluate all of these strategies. And, you know, we made multiple references to requiring a technical advisory group in our formal comments 2 weeks ago. There are independent science advisory entities and collections of people that we could choose as a CSC, that we could community design that advisory group, and it would help this process. You know, that third party input is what moved me and many others to be ready to approve some of the rail strategies we're about to vote yes on. Having them involved in the implementation phase would be a boon to efficiency and, you know, the protective strategies in this process. So I look forward to seeing those slides and seeing the request for a technical advisory group included therein. Thank you.
Technical advisory group as well. I'm hearing that. And I think I heard Jess talk about that. And also in the context of a committee, those could work hand in hand. And I think, Taylor, your hand was up and now it's down. Did you have an additional comment?
I was going to make a motion. Now I'm apparently thirding one. So.
Okay, so we have a motion to make to add some language into the SERP that speaks to the intention, and that has been seconded by Douglas, and it has been validated that Ryan and the Air District team feel like they can do that. I believe we are moving to approve the SERP as it stands right now with, oh, someone's commenting, but I think we're approving the SERP as it stands right now with the addition of the buses, which have had a lot of positive feedback and conversation around today. We are tabling the port conversation. We have not yet talked about locomotives. Yes, we have not yet talked about locomotives, but I want to acknowledge that that is the motion. And because we're low on time, what I want to do is vote on the SERP as it stands now, and then we'll continue the dialogue about locomotives. And if we have the time, we'll put locomotives in there. So we at least get the SERP voted on, and then we'll move that forward. And can I ask the Air District specifics as it relates to this technical advisory group? Is that something that is also being built into this language?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So to the question in the chat, there is language around adding buses to the SERP, and then paragraph language around the promises, the conversations around the integration, the collaboration, and the tag that will be built into this discussion and that speak to how they will move forward and evaluate during implementation. So that's language that will be added. The buses as a measure will be moved over, and that's what we want to do in terms of our first vote. Because the votes take time, we want to do that from a process standpoint, and then we move to the locomotives, okay? Because we're running light on time. So we're going to do the vote first, and then we'll add that last straggler. Okay, so there is a process for voting. It's a roll call voting, and there are quite a few of you. And so that's why we want to make sure there's plenty of you and that we don't lose anybody before 7:30. So what we are going to do is for everybody that is designated as a voting member of the CSC, we are going to call your name. We are going to track in real time your vote, and then we're going to show you that tally on the screen when we are done. So the first thing on the voting protocol to note is that government ex officio members are not eligible. Alternates are only eligible if their primary is not present. And so if you are an alternate, we'll call the primary. And then if the primary is not there, alternate, that's your chance. You should have a V on your name if you are eligible to vote, if you aren't certain. And then again, in order to move that motion forward, we need to reach 50% plus one. And so we will note how many have said yes and no when we do the vote. So we will have first the unscreen share. And then we will, behind the scenes, have Kim and Hannah will be tracking the names. I will call out the name, and then I will ask you all to unmute yourself when your name is called. We will do it by first name based on our roster of who is eligible to vote. Are there any questions before we get started?
Can we put the language of the vote, the question, into the chat or on the screen, just so we're all very clear on language?
Absolutely. I'm going to ask Hannah and Kim to type that in. If they can do it faster than I can. Can I see them?
Let's see.
Kim's going to type it in. And just to verbalize it one more time, what you're voting on is the SERP as it stood originally. And that includes every edit that has been incorporated since, I think, comments brought in today. Those have been incorporated into the latest draft of the SERP. In addition, there's going to be an additional paragraph in the SERP that speaks to the intention, the collaboration, and the implementation strategies that might go into how you might address some of those more sticky issues to make sure that you're using your money, your resources, your funding, and all of the possible coordination efforts as closely as possible. That's listed, going to be updated and incorporated. And thinking about data, I think there's conversation about health studies and other things that have been talked about that wanted to be built into that kind of introductory or paragraph language around the approach. The other thing that's going to be added is the buses, school bus measure that this group identified as a priority and that they like adding. That's going to be moved. What is not going in yet is locomotives or port. Port will be discussed on Tuesday. Locomotives will be discussed after this vote in the interest of time. So Kim has loaded in here. This is to approve the SERP with the bus measure and featuring written language about the implementation and collaboration, no port measures. Next time, we will discuss locomotives right after in the spirit of time. So that's the motion, and that's what we will vote on, and that's what we will call for in the next 30 seconds. And I'm going to begin. If Hannah and Kim give me the green light that they have the spreadsheet ready, perfect. Okay. And if you are not present, I'm going to list everybody, whether they're present or not, just to make sure that we haven't missed anybody. Anthony Macias, Jr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Arlene Galindo. And if Arlene's not here, Cynthia Lau.
Yes. Arlene is here, yes.
Thank you, Arlene. Bianca Mendoza.
Yes.
Thank you. Catherine Garupa White.
Yes.
Thank you. Debbie Provost.
Yes.
Thank you. Douglas Vigil.
Yes.
Thank you. Ed Ward.
Yes.
Thank you. Eric Parfrey. I'm not hearing Eric. I don't think he's present. Esperanza Vielma. And if Esperanza's not available, oh, great. Thank you. Eugene Fuss.
Yes.
Thank you. Florence Kulantang. I think I butchered your last name and I apologize.
Yes.
Glenabelle Toreno. Seeing none. Gloria. Alonzo Cruz.
Yes.
Thank you. Irene.
This is Irene. I vote yes.
Thank you. Jennifer Flores.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Double yes.
Yeah.
No problem. Jonathan Pruitt.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Nate Knott.
Yes.
Thank you. Kenda Templeton. Hearing none. Kevin Amen. Hearing none. Leonard Seward.
Yes.
Thank you, Leonard. Margot Proust.
Yes.
Thank you. Maria Cardenas.
Yes.
Thank you. Maria Mendez. Hearing none. Mariah Looney.
Yes.
Thank you. Mary Elizabeth.
Yes.
Thank you. Matt Holmes.
Yes.
Thank you. Missy Ray Magdalera. Hearing none. Nayeli Cruz Gomez. Okay, hearing none. Ned Laiba.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Nicholas Hatton.
Yes.
Thank you. Noemi Garcia.
Yes.
Thank you. Paulette Gross. Hearing none. Regina Griffin. Hearing none. Sylvia
Yes.
Cantu. Oh,
Yes.
Thank you. Was that Regina?
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Sylvia Cantu. Hearing none. Stacy Penyasi. Hearing none. Taylor Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. Tina Lau.
Oh,
Hearing
Erica,
none?
there is a note in the chat that Tina's frozen.
Oh, no, I
Oh,
unfroze.
okay.
I'm
Okay, there you
back.
go.
So yes, thank you.
Hi, Tina. Did you want to cast your vote?
Yes.
That's a yes.
And just a note that Stacy is also a yes. She was unable to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you both. And I said Taylor and I said Tina. Vanessa Palomares. And if Vanessa's not here, then Rita Valdez is her alternate. Hearing none. Victoria Moreno.
Yes.
Hearing. Oh, there you are.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that is the last person on our roster. I'm going to ask. I heard no no's, only absence, and so our final tally. I believe I'm going to ask Kim and Hannah to show us and validate your vote on screen. One of you, please share the numbers for us.
Kim got it.
Yep, that came out to 29 total.
Mine too.
29 yes, with technically a unanimous Serp support, which is phenomenal. Congratulations to the CSC for a phenomenal effort for the last few months. You should be so, so, so proud of yourself. It's worthy of an emoji. If you have a Zoom reaction, please do give it, because I think it's a really, really great milestone for you all. Fantastic, fantastic work. I do want to acknowledge all of that. Huge, huge accomplishment. So just congratulations. A couple other things. We still need to talk about locomotives. We've got 13 minutes and I think we can do that. And I'd like to do that. And then give you the flexibility, if you can, to vote on that if you want to add that measure. I did want to acknowledge that there's additional conversation that needs to happen. So there have been public comments that have been floated throughout in the chat that are acknowledged and recorded for the record. I'll ask Heather to continue to drop those in if you get additional ones, and we'll try and speed up the next 12 minutes to make sure our locomotives get the right conversation. Okay, let's talk about locomotives. And in order to do that, we are going to pull back up the slide that shows what the measure language is around locomotives. And I want to be able to flag for you what you have seen in the draft SERP already, what's currently able to be dropped in, And you guys just need to decide if you want to move that forward. So as you can see, this is an incentive program for replacing older diesel switcher locomotives with new clean engine technology. I will ask, I think it's Ryan, to give a very, very quick overview for the group.
Yeah, so we've talked about it a few times about the volume of emissions from this category. What we've proposed here would be to replace 4 of these. Saw in the chat, a question of how many total are here. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7. So not funding all of the ones that operate in the community. And this would only fund switcher locomotives, which are the ones that operate in the localized area. These are not the ones that go all across the United States. Questions in the past have been, can there be commitments to only operate in the AB 617 community? And Todd has shared that definitely can be part of those commitments, that the replacement of these would have to operate within the Stockton community. The amount of emissions associated with these would be 12 tons of particulate matter, which includes obviously toxic diesel particulate matter, which is known to be especially harmful to health. There's 502 tons of NOx emissions over the life, and then 31 tons of VOC. And one of the things that the steering committee asked for us to provide was some type of research. And so we did send out a couple of research articles from the National Institute of Health. Both were done in California. This one in particular that focused on locomotives showed that there were obvious and negative health impacts as a result of they mainly focused on children. And so kind of put this in perspective, you look at a school like Washington Elementary School, which is only a few hundred yards from where some of these trains sit and idle. There's a lot of opportunity to get a lot of emission reductions from this source if it's included as a measure in the SERP.
Thank you, Ryan. So I do see some comments in the chat. Some questions are being answered. It looks like this does produce a large bang for their buck, according to Nate, in terms of dollars to emission reductions. And I think what was identified in that spreadsheet that you might have seen early on in our discussion, there's a significant number of emissions that come from locomotives. I don't know if Jess has that available to pull up again, which is that spreadsheet between the with and without spreadsheet, that shows the emissions. If you could pull that up, I'll ask Hannah to stop share, just so you guys can see what that looks like and your SERP emission reductions with that inclusion.
Sorry, I'm muting and unmuting and screen sharing. Also, Jeff,
sorry.
Jess sound very similar. So I think Jeff and I are both like, who's being referenced?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, that makes sense.
No, it's okay. No, absolutely. So, this slide certainly shows with and without the 5 measures that were on the table today. But it's really not hard to see that locomotive switchers with the cleaner engine technologies compared to just those older, really dirty, we've had a lot of conversations about how these are some of the oldest locomotive engines out there, and they're now used in these very specific applications within the community, are really the biggest tonnage reduction of all of the measures or strategies that we have in the SERP. So that 521, even if we were to include everything else, would be really a big missed opportunity in comparison to what we could be getting if we're just looking at it, of course, from an emissions reduction target standpoint, which again, it's a community emissions reduction plan. So certainly putting a lot of money toward a lot of emissions reductions is, at least just on paper here, something that would be very supportive of that goal of the SERP.
And Jessica.
Thank you, Jess. Can you zoom in?
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Thank you, Kim.
Yes, I'm
zoom in
a presentation, but let me zoom. So sorry. So this is, I'm not sure how to share this the best way. So this line here is locomotive switchers. Maybe I'm sharing Is it still like really far away?
It's gotten better. You've gotten a little bit better. And I think you can see, if you scroll to the right, you'll get, you see the locomotive switchers, they cost 1.7 million. And they per, and there are 4. So for 6.8 million, you would get 521 tons of emission reductions.
And
is
this
how
would
you should
be,
read.
exactly. And that contributes obviously a significant amount to that 918 tons. So I think that's really kind of what you're looking for, Erica, is just how much does this contribute to that overall emission reduction total? And that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. So I want to open it up to the group and say, Douglas is asking, what does a switcher do? So to clarify that, if someone from the air district can specify. And then there was a photo, someone mentioned in a direct chat, there's a photo of a locomotive going down the street in the middle of Stockton, and the answer is yes, that was related to this discussion item.
So I can certainly clarify what a switcher does. And really, it does a couple of different things. In rail yards, what a switcher does is it builds trains. It moves cars around within a switch yard, and it puts those cars together and builds a train. And then it also services short haul situations where you're moving from one part of the yard to another yard, locally throughout a generally local area. Switchers move cars from one area to another. So they do a lot of very localized work within communities, around ports, around rail yards, and other, sort of areas like that. So they are generally very localized, and the chats were right. Nate was certainly correct in that, switchers are essentially where locomotives go to die. They've done their useful life as a line haul locomotive, and then they kind of get pressed into switcher duty. They're old, they're dirty, and they'll run forever because diesel engines are very hardy. So replacing those is definitely a good bang for your buck.
Great. So I think Douglas's question got answered, but I want to be mindful of that. Is there anybody on the line right now that really does not want to include this measure, that feels very strongly against it? If not, if you do, please raise your hand or unmute. Douglas has a question, it looks like.
Well, it really didn't answer so a switch car, what did it have to do with the air monitoring system? It just kind of switched it. What is the pollution? Why are we investing money into the railroad when they're not filtering out chemical or anything like that? Is there something I'm not aware of that, or what? That's all I need to know.
I'm confused by your question, Doug. Clarify a little bit.
It's a combustion, right? It's a diesel combustion still that you're.
It sounds like maybe, Douglas, that the switchers are old locomotives and they operate on diesel gasoline, and they're dirty. So they actually spew a lot of like the old black diesel fuel fumes into the air, which is really pretty carcinogenic. So it's actually, they're pretty dirty and pretty bad for the air quality.
Great.
Okay. All right. So in other words, that the diesel itself pollute the quality of air from the switch, that you want to upgrade it to what? To clean that particular, because the way I look at it, I'm looking at this graph. You want to have what is the locomotive? 6,800,000 for 4 switch?
Correct. Yes.
I think that maybe, Douglas, I think that maybe the word switch is maybe a little bit confusing, because it's not really a switch per se. It's actually an old locomotive. It's an old piece of it, like a train that has the engine and runs on the gas. So it's really an old train is what it is. That is very dirty. And so then to replace those with all electric trains that do all of that short run stuff within South Stockton, that's what the money is going toward.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's pretty much when we think we trained a lot for import, shipment, our farm animal, and a lot of farmer things. So I think that is pretty much. Are you guys talking about to put money into the fund? I'm for it. If anybody thinks
yeah, it's not. Thank you, Douglas. It seems like that the vast majority, and I'm not seeing anyone that's not for it, which means we don't need to do a vote. I'm giving the opportunity for anybody to raise their hand and say they don't like it, but I've seen no one say they're not for it, which means that we can add the switcher locomotive item to the Serp you just approved, and that will also move forward without the roll call vote needed, because it's more than 50% plus one, which is our absence of a consensus is when we need to do a vote based on our governance structure. So I am seeing full support for moving locomotives in, and we will have the funding to do that without making any adjustments to the funding unless we, absolutely needed to. But I think you are ready to move locomotives. I'm looking for any additional changes. I don't see any. We're ready to move locomotives in. The locomotives are also going to be added to the Serp, so we'll let the record reflect that the Serp we just approved now includes locomotives and school buses. And the only discussion you'll need to have on Tuesday next week is related to the ports. So it is 7:30, and we have done everything we need to do for this meeting with the exception of public comment. You've unanimously approved your Serp. You've added in additional measures, 2 of the 5. You've done a phenomenal amount of work in the last 2.5 hours. Huge yay. Yes, huge yay. Like, you guys don't have any idea how cool this is. You do. Show me the emojis. You do. You get, right? This is awesome. Really great work, everybody. Yay. Yes. If there were cake options and champagne, we would be, popping bubbles and definitely cutting cake. And the buses are staying in the locations that you identified. The trains are staying local. You have prioritized local emissions, and these additions, I think, do reflect that, and the language will reflect that as well. So when we meet again in person, I think cake or cupcakes are definitely on the menu. And what I will ask our friends at the Air District is if there are any additional public comment. While they're looking for that, I'm going to ask for any final comments from the committee first, and then the Air District. Any committee comments? No hands?
Debbie's physical hand is raised.
Oh, hi, Debbie. Hey, Debbie.
I just have a question. I must have missed when the meeting is Tuesday. Did we schedule?
We don't have a date or time yet. No, it's not scheduled. Okay. I think the way this will be coordinated is by doodle poll as always. But I think Tuesday is the last date you guys probably could meet. So look for an email about that. Not set yet.
So Tuesday, because we have steering committee meetings in both Chapter and South Central Fresno next week on Monday and Wednesday. So the day that we're looking at would be Tuesday. And we'll send out more information to the steering committee, definitely.
Okay.
Great. Any other committee comments or Air District comments? I see lots of excited emojis, and that is so well, founded. This is perfect. Thanks, lots of thank yous.
Thank you.
Thank you all for letting us move this through and end pretty close to on time. Matt, especially you, since I know I always move you around, Matt, but trust me, I respect all your comments. I just want to make sure we get ended on time. So thanks for letting me pick and choose some of those comments. And I believe we are almost adjourned. I want to check on public comments.
Erica and Margot has her
hand. I see Margot's hand as well. Yes, Margot, I see your hand, and then I'll ask Heather for public comment before we adjourn.
Just really quick, I just want to thank the people at the Air District and at CARB and all around I know you've all heard from me, and I've like yelled a bit here and there. And this has been like herding cats at a distance, without being able to be in the same room. So thank you very much. This has been a challenge, and we're not done, but bear with us. So thank you.
Great comment, Margaret. You're right. You're not done. This is just one step in a process, and now the hard work begins of really implementation and making sure that it gets done the way that you all want it to be done. So fantastic work. And seeing no public comments from Heather, I think our meeting is adjourned. Congratulations all. Thank you. Have a great evening.
So much. Yay. Oh.
Yay, yay, yay.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, Regina.
Matches.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.
Eric.
Best interpreter in the world.
Yes. Good night, Arlene.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Night. Thank you, Douglas.
And thank you to Eric.
Thanks,
This took
Marco.
us a lot of 200-page document. Wow. That's a lot of work.
I know.
Thanks, Gil. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
being here
Christine.
tonight.
Good night, Arlene.
I'd like to thank CARB staff for being part of this because I neglected to thank you at the beginning.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gil.
Thank you, Gil. Fantastic presentation about the buses.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. I think everybody deserves a great rest of their nights.
Absolutely.
I already ate my
Thank you
dinner
all.
with carrots thanks to Jamie. I'm ready to go.
Transition from popcorn to carrots, huh?
I did. Yeah.
It keeps us healthy.
Who's
I
Bo?
hear a baby, Jeff.
There is a baby. Baby's being fed right now, so you're just going to hear a baby.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
I think we're still recording.
We
Oh, Jonathan.
Are.
Ladies